The Human Rights Commission sponsors and presents a variety of different events during the course of the year, and one of the ones that we focus on is International Human Rights Day, which is celebrated around the world on December 10th. And this is an opportunity for people around the community, both within city government and also different community groups, to come together and share what they're doing with regard to human rights implementation. We have people speak, we have entertainment from various community organizations, we have tabling. The tabling is interesting because community groups relate what they're doing in terms of their mission, their goals and activities to provisions of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So this is one of the things that we do to raise awareness in the community, to reinforce the values of the Universal Declaration, and to remind people that they have these rights and that these rights are really important.
Well, I do think that we believe, and I believe really strongly, that human rights do begin at home, and that means that every level of government has to be respectful of human rights, support human rights, and protect human rights, and particularly the local level of government. Universal Declaration, it really talks about everything from people having access to food, to shelter, to being treated the same as everybody else. These human rights aren't just about slurs and terrible things that people do to each other. They're about how we live in our community every day, how we make sure that people have their basic needs met. We certainly have to be sure that justice is served out to everyone, but there's a quality of life and a livability. That's what the Human Rights Declaration is really all about. Accessibility issue is something that we take a lot of pride in this community, that we try to make sure that everybody can participate in all of our programs, that you're not left out because you have a disability. We've had challenged the federal government over building the federal building in order to assure that everybody had the same kind of access. These are the kinds of everyday basic human rights that we think belong to each and every one of us, and that we will strive to support and grow and stand up for in our community.
It has always been a high value of ours at the police department to protect our community from violations of constitutional rights and human rights. Now, there's limits to what we can do in protecting human rights, because not all of those violations are crimes, and we are restricted to only investigate violations of the law, criminal law. The recent implementation of the civilian oversight system has brought clarity to not only the communities, but our interest in ensuring that our officers are experts in constitutional law and use of force, and our awareness of the implications and the effects of some mental health conditions that people have in our community. The police department has a critical role in the city's response to hate crimes. It is a great value of ours to protect the human and constitutional rights of all people in Eugene. And there are few crimes as ugly as those based on hate and bias. So the police department staff and other city staff have worked together to develop protocols to ensure effective investigation of these crimes and the proper communication to the appropriate people when these crimes occur and who's been victimized by them. The improved communication we have ensures that the city's leadership, which includes the mayor and city council and city manager and others, are aware when a crime has occurred, so that due care can be given to the person who's involved in an appropriate and sensitive way, but also so that city leaders are familiar with the trends that are occurring in our community and know when it would be right to take action to help to raise the awareness in community about things that we could do differently.
The City of Eugene has benefited for over 40 years from a robust Human Rights Commission and its spin-off projects, immersing our community in international human rights standards for several decades. The community also has a very strong community coalition for the advancement of human rights. Recently, Eugene City Government has also developed a 5-year diversity and equity strategic plan with a human rights framework as one of its main infrastructural elements. Some outcomes of the plan of the Diversity and Equity Strategic Plan will be increased training on and reporting of human rights standards, as well as considering social equity issues in all programming and policies. The city created a city staffed equity and human rights board, which will work closely on projects and policies with the Human Rights Commission and the Community Coalition. Some of the first couple of collaborative projects that have emerged were the creation of a bias and hate incident response plan, an annual public forum on the state of equity and human rights in Eugene, and recently the community put on a very successful Human Rights Summit, a collaborative project between the city, the Human Rights Commission, the Equity and Human Rights Board, and the Community Coalition. And over 200 people attended, over 50 partners were represented, and a lot of amazing outcomes came out of that summit.
You know, racial discrimination is something that I live with on a daily basis, because either people are reacting to me because they are fundamentally not happy that I'm here, or they don't know why I'm here. And so that's an opportunity to educate and have a conversation about how they're feeling. There are groups that don't care. You know, they're going to be racist, and they're going to be harmful, and I do have some level of fear for them. Human rights are very important to a nation that is as big and as powerful and as affluent as this country is, because it levels the playing field for all. Human rights is guaranteed to us in our Constitution. Human rights, as I said earlier, levels the playing field. You have certain inalienable rights that are yours, and yes, it's taken many different stages in this country to be able to get there. It's the right to vote was first. The right to have African Americans be able to vote. The right for women to vote. I mean, those are all the part of the rights that we have that are guaranteed to us. And if you find yourself being labeled as an illegal person, or there are no illegal humans, and yet you have the atmosphere and the community that right now that labels you just by your appearance, whether you're homeless, whether you're gay, or whether you are from another culture, especially.
So the City of Eugene as an organization, we've done actually equity and human rights and diversity work for a very long time. What we've been able to do in the last few years is really make it more transparent in the organization. We've also revised our traditional diversity committees into the Equity and Human Rights Board, which is made up of representatives from all of the departments across the city. And it's a collective effort to identify how we implement the diversity and equity strategic plan in the organization, and also just generally integrate those concepts into our work. Along with that is the opportunity to use training to help educate our employees more around equity and human rights, how we bring that into our work, how it's part of our leadership programs, how it's part of our daily work. And so a lot of our development is currently focused that direction. So as we're doing the equity and human rights work in the organization, we continue to look to the Human Rights Commission as being an arm to the community and a direct connection to the community. I see that strengthening over time, and that we end up with a better understanding of a like language around the concepts, of shared goals around the concepts. The community members are a resource to the organization, and the Diversity and Equity Strategic Plan has really given us a framework to be able to continue to look for those partnerships. We talk more and more when we do trainings in the organizations of how do we get community members involved, how do we bring voices in, how do we hear from voices that aren't traditionally heard from in the community. And so that's one of the challenges, the questions that are being asked on a daily basis as we're doing our work.
The issues faced by a blind person are different than the issues faced by a deaf person, and the issues faced by a mobility challenged person are different. All very different. The commonality is that they're challenges. Accessibility, common, they're different, misperceptions from the public, and we can share that. But I think what's important is, what is the unique part of being blind, the unique part of being deaf, the unique part of being mobility challenged. And that's why I think we should get together and just understand each other. When you think about it, access to information, access to physical issues, like going to the second floor of a building, or an announcement, access to that. You know, we all have a right to that information, no matter who we are, no matter what language we speak, no matter how much we could hear or not. And so when that human right gets ignored or not satisfied, then it becomes a human right issue, you know.
I think it's not possible to have a sustainable community without addressing human rights head on. I mean, as I mentioned, it is a key tenet of sustainability that we're looking at social equity concerns. But frankly, if you have a community where there are human rights violations and concern and upset and agitation around those kinds of issues, you don't have the moral momentum to move forward with sustainable development if you're caught up in these more fundamental questions. And I think I think Eugene is well positioned to move forward on this because they have addressed a lot of the fundamental questions around human rights. There's a great deal of sensitivity in this community around that, and that provides an excellent platform for moving forward with sustainable development. If we have that kind of community-wide concern and protectiveness around human rights, just serves as an excellent platform for us to move forward. You know, human rights come into play with sustainability and thinking about what our rights are as human beings on this planet. And I think those get to some pretty fundamental rights around rights to live a healthy, prosperous life, the right to basic services around things like energy, housing, sanitation, transportation. I think sustainability also addresses basic human rights through the idea of social equity and having equal access to all the benefits of sustainable development. So I think it touches on basic human rights in many, many ways, and particularly the basic human right of providing a decent life for your children in the next generation and beyond. I think that, that's such an important part of sustainability, is that we're looking toward the future to guarantee that what we carry on, what we give as a legacy to our kids and to our grandkids is meets their basic needs and addresses basic human rights as well. I was at a conference in Boston a few weeks ago to talk about climate action planning and specifically this question about adaptation for the future. And I was surprised at how absent concerns about social equity were from that conversation. It was just the city of Eugene and the city of Portland that were really concerning themselves with bringing that into the conversation and making that a part of how we go forward with our planning. I was proud to be able to represent Eugene in that context, to think that we're at that leading edge and that we bring with us this history and this tradition of addressing those kinds of concerns in all the work that we do as a city.